My mother was the biological daughter of the Johnson family, a wealthy household in New York City. She was kidnapped and sold off to a remote small town in Texas. Before that happened, she'd already been married and had a 2-year-old son. After being sold, she was forced to marry an old man nearly 60 years old. I was the result of that marriage. When I was 7, the Johnson family finally came with the local sheriff and federal agents to the remote town. My mother broke down in tears, hugging her 10-year-old son tightly. When she looked at me, all she could ask the sheriff was, "Do I have to take this child back with me?" That was the first time I met my Uncle Robert and my stepbrother. Both looked at me with anger and disgust. The child of that bastard? How could the Johnson family ever accept this? Terrified, I clutched at my mother's worn-out Nike sneakers, not daring to speak. Dozens of reporters from CNN and the New York Times had their cameras pointed straight at me. My hands shook, tears filling my eyes, but I held them back. The sheriff finally spoke, his voice heavy. "The father of this child was involved in human trafficking and has been arrested. The only legal guardian left is you." My mother's face crumbled. Mrs. Elizabeth Carter, a family friend, almost screamed, "I don't want to raise her. My life has already been ruined for 8 years. Why should I keep living in pain?" She broke down, pushing me away violently. "I don't need you. Don't follow me anymore. If you don't have a guardian, just go to foster care." I fell hard onto the cold concrete floor, my head throbbing. Above me were adults staring down federal agents, reporters, and members of the Johnson family. A deputy sheriff helped me up, his eyes full of pity. My uncle, Robert Johnson, well-dressed and angry, stepped forward. "Why should my sister be forced to take her back? That child belongs in an orphanage." Even my stepbrother, handsome and proud, hugged my mother tightly, insisting the Johnsons would never accept the child of a criminal. Some reporters murmured their agreement. "This child shouldn't be forced on the victim. It will only hurt her more." In my blurry vision, I saw my mother's old Converse shoes and my stepbrother's clean white Adidas sneakers. My head still spun. I shoved my trembling hands into the pocket of my worn-out hoodie, not daring to move closer. Despite the protest, the sheriff handed me over to the Johnson family. My mother didn't even look at me as she pulled her son into the back seat of a shiny black Chevrolet Suburban. I followed, but she slammed the door shut. Uncle Robert walked past me, coldly opened the SUV's trunk, and said, "Get in." My heart leapt. I had never been in a car before. I quickly took off my dirty shoes, afraid of messing up the vehicle. I curled up inside the trunk, looking up at him, hoping for some kindness. But the sheriff frowned at him, warningly. Uncle Robert sneered, "What? Is it against the law to let a kid ride in the trunk?" The vehicle sped down the endless Texas highway. The darkness spun around me. My stomach churned, and I begged softly, "Mom, I'm gonna throw up." No one answered. I remembered when I once threw up from a fever, my dad beat me with a leather belt so hard I couldn't walk for days. Trembling in fear, I tried to hold it in, but the nausea won. I vomited. Inside the trunk, the stench spreading. In panic, I pulled off my tattered jacket, desperately wiping, whispering to myself, "Clean it up. Clean it up, it won't be dirty anymore." If I made a mess, I wouldn't be allowed into the Johnson house, and I wouldn't be able to stay with my mom. She was all I had, even though I knew she'd never liked me. From the moment I was born, my dad only knew how to beat and curse at both me and her. The only person who sometimes stayed by my side was my mom. I scrubbed it as hard as I could, maybe because I had vomited too much, struggling to breathe. I felt a hot liquid run from my nose. Reflexively, I wanted to cover it, but my fingers wouldn't move anymore. Dizzy, I collapsed and lost consciousness. I don't know how long it was before a voice shouted in disgust, "Get out of the car." I jolted awake. The vehicle had stopped in the driveway of a suburban mansion in Dallas. The SUV trunk opened. My uncle's face was pale with fury as he glared at me. My stepbrother took one look at me and immediately turned aside to vomit. His face twisted with revulsion. Night had fallen, but the yard was lit by street lamps. Only then did I realize my body and the trunk were smeared with vomit and blood. My nose was bleeding. Panicked, I stammered, "I'm sorry. I'll clean it up. I'll clean it up." Uncle Robert only frowned, ignoring me. A girl about my age came running out of the mansion. She wore a sparkly princess dress, her big eyes shining like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. She grabbed my mother's hand joyfully. "Oh, Carter, you're finally back." My mother froze. Uncle Robert explained, "This is little Emily Carter from the Carter family. She insisted on coming to welcome you. When she was a baby, you even held her in your arms. She says if she ever has a daughter, she hopes she'd be just like her." My mom's eyes grew red as she stared at the girl. I lowered my head, ashamed of my scarred, rough hands. Emily clung sweetly to my mom's arm. "Then I'll be your goddaughter, Aunt Carter. I'll be Robert's little sister, too." Together, Emily and Uncle Robert led my mother inside. He whispered to her gently, "Stay here for the night, rest. First, tomorrow we'll go back to New York. Grandpa said he wants to see you again." My mother suddenly cut him off. He faltered, holding her hand, eyes full of pain. Then he glanced back at me with cold disgust. "Don't worry, I'll send her away soon. The Johnson family will never keep her." I crawled out of the trunk, dazed, watching them walk away. The autumn wind cut sharp through my thin shirt. Uncle Robert draped a black Armani coat over my mother's shoulders. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. All I had ever worn were torn clothes. My coat was already ruined from scrubbing the car, leaving me shivering in nothing but a thin, long-sleeved shirt. My stepbrother finished vomiting, glanced at me curled up on the ground, filthy and pathetic, as if I were some kind of monster. He quickly turned away and hurried inside. I kept wiping at the trunk with my ruined jacket, but no matter how I scrubbed it stayed dirty. I wanted to ask for a rag, but once they were inside, they locked the door. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, I saw them sitting by the dining table. Platters of food filled the table. Even through the glass, I imagined I could smell the aroma. My stomach clenched painfully. Uncle Robert kept piling food onto my mom's plate. My stepbrother poured her water. At one point, Uncle Robert gently pulled up her sleeve, shocked at the scars on her arm. His hand shook as he wiped his eyes. My stepbrother covered his face, sobbing. Little Emily nestled close, and my mom's trembling arms wrapped them both tight like how she used to hold me before I turned 3. She never hugged me again after that. When I came to, they had gone. Upstairs, a housekeeper cleared the half-full dishes, dumped them into a trash bag, and carried it out to the large bin at the gate. After she left, I ran to the bin. On tiptoe, I stretched my arm into the tall container, almost falling in, until I finally dragged the bag out. The smell of roasted meat and warm bread burst out. Pushing aside napkins and scraps, I stuffed the food into my mouth. I hadn't eaten all day. Even the sour liquid in my stomach had been thrown up. Squatting by the trash, I devoured it like a feast, until my belly finally swelled instead of caving in. I leaned back, stroking my stomach with relief. I remembered the nights when my mother whispered about escaping our old life, leaving my abusive father behind, returning to her real family. I used to imagine what that home would be like, what those relatives would be like. Now I knew. The home belonged to her, the family belonged to her, not to me. I had no home, no one who loved me, never before, and not now either. The wind stung my eyes, and tears began to fall again. As I heard sudden footsteps behind me, he walked out. Panicked, I tossed the trash bag back into the bin, but the grease at the corner of my mouth was still there, and a few grains of rice clung to my shirt. He stared at me with an icy look. "Who said you could eat?" I couldn't stop trembling, stammering as I tried to explain. I saw that food was thrown away. Nobody was eating it." His face darkened. When his eyes landed on Mom's scar-covered arms, his anger burned even colder. His voice was sharp as a blade. "If nobody's eating it, it goes to the dog, not to you. Don't think you matter here." His hand tightened into a fist like he'd finally made up his mind about something. "Get out. The Johnsons aren't gonna feed you. I'd rather go to jail than let Lily ever see you again and suffer more because of you." But I had nowhere to go. Back in the old town, when Dad came home drunk, he'd curse me as bad luck and kick me out. Nobody ever let me stay a single night. Now in this strange city, I was even more lost. My chest filled only with fear. I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't leave. A stray kid with no food, no roof would die. I racked my brain until I finally clung to the only thought I had left. I can work. I can clean, do laundry, whatever you need. I'll work as long as I get food and a place to sleep. His eyes were still cold. He clearly didn't want me there. I clutched at my shirt and forced the words out through a shaking voice. I don't even need much. Just plain rice. 2 bowls a day, even 1 bowl would be enough. Annoyed, he turned to leave. I ran after him with pumpkin, gathering all the courage I had left. I can even take the beatings. No matter how you hit me, no matter what you call me, I can take it. My dad used to say the same thing. A useless daughter like me only had value when he beat me to vent his anger. Mom hates me, you and your brother hate me too. If it helps you feel better, then that can be my worth. At last, he stopped. I instinctively flinched as he turned back. Even though I just claimed I could handle it, I still remembered the searing pin of Dad's cane across my back days ago. Fear told me to shrink away, but I forced myself to stand still, waiting for the blow. But his hand never came down. After a long silence, his voice cut through the air, cold and detached. "Don't think you'll stay here long. Once I figure out how, you're gone." So I stayed in the Johnsons' house. I followed him, his mom, and his brother when they moved to New York. Their home was enormous. Like something out of a fairy tale, dot in the living room hung several portraits. One showed a beautiful woman playing piano and painting. Around the photo were medals and ribbons. In another, she cradled a toddler boy in her arms, while a man stood beside her, gazing at them tenderly. He was handsome, nearly as striking as Michael himself. I stared at the woman in the picture. Her skin glowed like snow, her smile brighter than any Hollywood star I'd secretly watched on the village chief's old TV. She looked like Mom, but also not like her. Mom's face and hands were rough, scarred. Nothing like that perfect image. I couldn't stop staring. Then I heard Mom's muffled sobs. Michael snapped at the housekeeper, and the photos were quickly taken away. That evening, the man from the photo arrived. Michael was eating with Mom. His brother sat on the couch, gaming. I was scrubbing the kitchen floor when the shouting started. Peeking out, I froze as Mom smashed a porcelain bowl against the man's forehead. Blood streamed down his face, his eyes wet. His voice broke with pain. "Lily, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've become, I'm still your husband. And Sarah is still our daughter." Mom raised another bowl to throw, but Michael blocked her. Her eyes were wild, her head shaking violently. No, I have nothing to do with you anymore. Get out." Her son rushed forward, sobbing, clinging to her. "Mom, Dad and I have been waiting for you. Please don't. Send him away." Her whole body shook, her face twisting into something unrecognizable. The psychologist Michael had called stepped in quickly. "Mrs. Johnson is unstable right now. Sir, it's best if you come back another day." The man looked at Mom with heartache, then finally stumbled away, barely steady on his feet. A single tear slipped down her cheek as she watched him leave. The doctor and Michael led her upstairs. Only her son remained in the living room, crying harder and harder. Then his head snapped toward me, crouched behind the kitchen doorway. I shrank back, pretending to scrub the floor, but he stormed into the kitchen, yanked the mop from my hands, and threw it into the trash. He shoved me hard, teeth clenched. I stumbled, my head cracking against the cabinet, a loud ringing filling my ears. His voice shook with rage. "It's all your fault. You ruined everything. Mom used to love me most. She loved Dad too. But now she doesn't want him anymore, and she doesn't even hold me anymore." His eyes were bloodshot as he closed in, crouched down, and wrapped his hand around my throat. "My little sister should have been like Emily, not a disgusting thing like you. Why don't you just die? Why don't you and that bastard both just drop dead?" I didn't dare fight back. For a long time, I could only tremble and force out a single sentence. "I'm sorry. It's always my fault." From the moment I was born, that's what everyone said. My dad and grandma scolded me. People in our small town would shake their heads whenever they saw me and sigh, saying giving birth to a daughter like me was a curse, a punishment. Before I turned 3, Mom would occasionally defend me. But after what happened when I was 3, she only looked at me with eyes full of hatred, as if I had ruined her life. I thought it must have been my fault. So I got used to apologizing, even though I had no idea what I had done wrong. That my brother's hand tightened around my neck. The housekeeper, who clearly didn't like me either, just kept cleaning the kitchen as if nothing was happening. By the time I truly couldn't breathe anymore and was on the verge of passing out, he finally let go. His eyes were bloodshot as he stood up and spat out angrily, "None of you are going to end well." Then he staggered away. I whispered weakly, "I'm sorry," as the housekeeper shoved me into a tiny room on the first floor. It had nothing inside, just an empty floor. No bed, no blanket, nothing at all. She said coldly, "The Johnson family is in ruins because of you. Sleeping on the floor is all you deserve." My body was drenched in sweat, sticky and reeking. I wanted to ask if I could take a shower, if there were some old clothes I could wear. But her icy face silenced me. That night, curled up in the corner of the bare room, I drifted between sleep and fever. My head felt like it was on fire. My throat burned as if pierced by needles. I groped in the dark, pushed open the door, hoping to find some water. As soon as I stepped out, I heard faint voices from the living room, Uncle Robert and Dr. Miller. "Her condition is consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. Treatment will take time. She must be shielded from anything that might trigger memories of her past trauma." Uncle Robert's voice broke with fury and grief. "Everything else we can avoid, but that child." He paused, his tone desperate. "Dr. Miller, is there any way you could diagnose Lily with a severe mental disorder?" Silence, then a heavy sigh. "You mean use her condition as a reason to declare her unfit for custody and send the child to a foster home?" "Yes," Uncle Robert whispered. "I can't think of another way." My heart stopped. I froze in the doorway, every sound blurring around me. Dr. Miller finally said, "Mr. Johnson, such a false diagnosis would never be signed by any hospital or doctor. Custody can only be revoked if the guardian has a severe psychiatric condition combined with a history of abuse or violence. Otherwise, it's impossible." Something crashed in the living room, shattering loudly. Instinctively, I shrank back into the darkness, my hands trembling. I heard Uncle Robert's voice, hoarse with rage and grief. "She told me she once tried to escape 4 years ago. She almost made it. But her foot was caught. Now it's ruined. She can't play piano anymore, can't paint anymore. Her face, she used to cry for hours over a single pimple, but now it's scarred beyond recognition. Dr. Miller, why? Why does it have to be this way? That monster destroyed nearly everything my sister had. My parents died from heartbreak, and the loss still forces the Johnson family to raise the child of the man who hurt her." I staggered back into my dark room, closing the door quietly behind me, and in that moment, I finally understood what my sin was. I was the daughter of a trafficker who deserved to die. And so did I. I had heard stories in town. My dad couldn't find a wife, so Grandma bought him one from human traffickers. My grandma and dad were no different from those criminals. My throat and head burned as if set ablaze. I shrank back into the corner, too afraid to even search for water. Droplets slid down my face, I didn't know if it was sweat or tears. I licked my lips, tasting bitterness. I lowered my head, staring at my toes. But all I saw was endless blackness dot my consciousness slipped away. I remembered Uncle Robert's words. Mom had once tried to escape, 4 years ago, but someone had held her back. He didn't know that it was me. I was only 3 years old. That day, Mom finally found a chance to take me to town. She managed to slip away from Dad and Grandma, who were following us. She left me at a small store and tried to catch a bus out of town, but I chased after her and was struck by a car in the middle of the road. My head bleeding, I hadn't wanted to stop her. I just instinctively wanted to go with her. In my first 3 years of life, Mom was the only one who ever loved me. She'd already stepped onto the bus, but when she looked back and saw me crying in the street, she froze. Then she jumped off and ran to hold me. She tried to board again, but the bus pulled away. Someone from town recognized her, grabbed her, and dragged her back. Dad and Grandma arrived in time to pull us both home. Mom was locked in a dark room. For a long, long time, I stood outside listening to her screams. I cried and beat on the door until Dad kicked me in the stomach dot when that door finally opened. Again, Mom was no longer the same. She didn't cry anymore. Her eyes were empty, like a bottomless pit. From then on, she was just another broken woman in a small American town, silently laboring day after day. She never hugged me anymore, never comforted me again. One night when I climbed into her bed, she looked at me with eyes cold as ice and whispered, "Why don't you just die already?" Now, whenever I remember that moment, I curl up in the corner, the walls pressing hot against me. I don't know how many days I burned with fever, how long I lay there while no one came to check on me. Mom asked me again and again why I hadn't died yet. My uncle and my brother told me people like me never end well. It felt like a fire was devouring me. From the inside, slowly, I stopped feeling thirsty, stopped feeling pain. My body slipped lower and lower until it seemed to lift away, light as air. I thought maybe I really had died, just as everyone wished. Days blurred by in a haze, like I'd been gone a long time, but then one morning, sunlight streamed through the window. My eyes opened. I was still in the empty room. I was still alive. A wave of sadness washed over me. I'd failed them again. I'd failed my mother, my uncle, and my brother by surviving. The door slammed open. The housekeeper walked in, face twisted with contempt. She threw a glass of water and a bowl of rice down in front of me. Her eyes brimmed with disgust. "Children of traffickers like you don't deserve to live. It's only because Mrs. Johnson softened her heart one more time that you're even breathing." I lifted my head sharply. Was it my mother who told her to bring this? The housekeeper gave me a scornful glance and left. I didn't know how many days I had gone without food or sleep. I had wished for death. My body clung stubbornly to life. I couldn't stop myself from drinking every drop of water, from eating every grain of rice. My mind drifted in and out. Those cruel words echoed again. She can't play piano anymore. She can't paint anymore. My sister has been destroyed. My parents died in grief, and yet the Johnsons were forced to raise the child of the man who ruined her. Dr. Miller. I couldn't think of any better way, but it was nearly impossible. In my head, I saw the pictures in the living room. A woman in a beautiful dress, eyes as bright as sunlight, playing piano, painting with grace, like Snow White come alive. That was my mother and me. I was filthy, ugly, dark, something that should never have existed in her life. My uncle once said there had to be another way. Maybe there was. With food in my stomach, I gathered a little strength. Through the cracked door, I heard voices in the living room. I staggered up and walked out. My uncle sat with my mother. The sound of my footsteps made him turn, glaring with hatred and suspicion. My brother wasn't there. I guessed he'd already gone to school. My mother turned too. Her pale face tightened, and she quickly looked away. But I noticed her hands trembling at her sides. Her gaze had stopped, just for a moment, on the ugly scar across the back of my hand. The scar my father had left when he poured boiling water over me in her eyes. I saw not only disgust, but also fear. Too many marks tied me to him, the scars. The eyebrows, she said over and over, looked just like his. I forced my voice out, hoarse from days of silence. Can I go to school? My uncle sneered. You think the Johnsons would waste money sending a kid like you to school? I knew softly. I heard even elementary schools have boarding programs. My mother suddenly cut me off. Ryan is not your brother. He is my son, the son I had with the man I truly loved. He belongs to me. He is the one I cherish. The kind of child I want is someone like Emily. I lowered my head. I'm sorry. I understand. After a long silence, my uncle's voice rang out. Fine, you can transfer to a boarding school. The Johnsons will only provide the bare minimum required by law. Don't expect anything more. It was clear, if they could pay to keep me away. That was the easiest solution. Asterisk, I clenched the hem of my shirt and nodded. Yes. So I enrolled in the same elementary school my brother attended, but as a boarding student. I started first grade, the oldest and dumbest kid in class. I had never been to kindergarten, never learned the basics. On the first day, my brother came to my classroom once. After he left, the kid sitting next to me scrawled all over my book cover with a pencil, then spat toward me. You're the child of criminals. Stay away from me. The others already knew my story. They laughed, shoved their desks farther. From mine, threw crumpled papers and chip wrappers at me when the teacher entered. She stopped them, but one boy shouted, her dad was a trafficker. Ryan Johnson said so. She's just like those criminals who were arrested. Who knows if she kidnapped us too? The others chimed in. Yeah, she stinks. Makes me dizzy just sitting near her. She has to be bad. My desk partner picked up his books and moved to the back of the room. I'd rather stand than sit next to her. One by one, the kids in front and behind me stood up too. Even the teacher said nothing, as though weighing the truth of it. The noise drew the principal to our class. I overheard my homeroom teacher whispering to him, her father was a man like that. How can our school accept a student like her? She's damaged from the start. That half our funding comes from the Johnson family. I bowed my head, clutching my textbook so hard the corner bent and wrinkled. I pressed my forehead against it, smoothing the pages over and over. Only when the principal left did the teacher scowl at me and point toward a lonely desk by the blackboard. Daniel Johnson, from now on you sit here. I nodded, stood up quietly, packed my books, and moved to the front desk. From behind, a crumpled paper ball hit my back. The teacher turned her head away, pretending not to see, and opened the book to start teaching. The moment the dismissal bell rang, she left the classroom. A group of kids from the back shouted at me all at once. Daniel Johnson, don't you dare turn around. If you so much as look at someone, it means you're trying to kidnap them. We'll call the cops to have you arrested. I gripped the edge of my desk, keeping my head down, and during those 10 minutes of recess, in the afternoon when school ended, parents came with warm smiles to pick up their children. I walked back alone to the dormitory. I was the only first grader who stayed in the boarding hall. My room had 4 beds, but the other 3 were occupied by older girls. Within just a few days, they, too, had heard the rumors about me. Even their parents showed up, furious. In the end, the 4-person dorm became mine alone. The Johnson family never came to visit me, but they never failed to pay tuition. So even though I occupied the entire room like some kind of unwanted creature, Principal Carter said nothing. Over time, more kids from neighboring rooms stopped boarding too. Their parents pulled them out. With no one to play with, nowhere to go, and nothing to do, I buried myself in textbooks, memorizing every line. At the end of the semester, I ranked first in the class. My homeroom teacher handed me the certificate of achievement, sighing as she did so. Daniel Johnson came in first this time. From below, angry voices shouted, so what if a human trafficker's kid gets good grades? He'll still end up in jail for kidnapping people one day. For the first time, I lifted my head and whispered in defense, I didn't kidnap anyone. My old deskmate stormed forward, snatched the certificate from my hands, and stomped on it. The teacher frowned, clearly thinking the students had gone too far, unsure if she should intervene. I bent down, picked up the dirty certificate, and looked up at her. "It's okay, ma'am." Then I turned to the furious boy, speaking seriously. "I really didn't kidnap anyone. I hate my dad too. If a child could choose their parents, no matter how many options there were, I would never choose him." He spat on the floor in front of me, and others quickly joined in mocking me. When school ended, I walked back to the dorm alone. Looking in the wall mirror, I noticed I had grown taller. I brushed my bangs aside. My eyebrows, thick and dark, were something my mother had always disliked. They seemed even darker now. I thought of my father's face, fierce with heavy curved brows that made him look terrifying. I compared them to mine. They didn't look the same at all, but if Mom said they did, then they must. On the desk was a pair of safety scissors for craft projects. I froze, then picked them up, lifting the blades toward my brows. What if I cut them off? Would they grow back differently? Lighter, softer, not like his. But children's scissors were dull, and my brows were short. It took me forever to trim. Just a little. They looked thinner, lighter, but not enough. I was about to cut more when a loud voice called from downstairs. "Daniel Johnson, come down here." I knew that voice, Michael Johnson's. I'd been at the school nearly half a year, and no one from the Johnson family had ever come to see me. Michael usually sent other kids to bully me, but he himself never bothered to look at me. Whenever he saw me, he avoided me like the plague. My heart pounded. I rushed to the window and looked down. From that distance, I couldn't see his face. Clearly only hear his arrogant tone. "I heard you ranked first, huh? Show me what a top student certificate looks like." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. Meanwhile, my classmate, the girl who ranked second, was picked up by her parents. They brought her a giant teddy bear as a reward. Her dad lifted her and the bear together, carrying both out of the classroom. I watched them leave. I remembered when I was very little, Mom used to lift me high in the air just like that. After I turned 3, no one ever lifted me again. My body trembled. I shouted as loud as I could, my voice shaking. Wait a second." I turned and ran to my bed, nearly tripping over a broom, yanked my pillow up, and pulled out the certificate I had hidden beneath it. The shoe prints were still there. I rubbed at them with my sleeve, but they wouldn't come off completely. Hugging it close, I bolted downstairs. I had already planned my excuse. I'd say I dropped it. That's why it was dirty. I ran straight to the big tree near the dormitory and stopped in front of Michael. It had been so long since I saw him this close. He'd grown taller, his face looking more and more like Mom's. Looking at him, I felt as if I were seeing her again, and joy filled my chest. My feet were cold. I only then noticed I had lost one shoe somewhere along the way. But I didn't dare turn back for it. Instead, I held up the certificate carefully, nervously, but also with hope. Here, take it." Only then did I realize Michael wasn't alone. A few older boys stood beside him, probably his classmates. Among them was Jessica Turner, smirking with thinly veiled contempt. Michael smiled too. He grabbed the certificate with one hand and with the other, slowly tore the edged dot and in an instant ripped the paper. Split clean and 2 dot, it felt like something inside me was being torn apart. I reached out desperately, trying to snatch back the very first certificate of achievement I had ever earned. I still remembered what my teacher once said in class: "If you study hard and achieve great results, one day you'll make good money. Then you can buy yourself a big house. Even if no one loves you, even if no one accepts you as family, you can still build a home of your own." That's why good grades and that certificate meant so much to me. But Robert Johnson only had to raise his hand high, and no matter how much I stretched, face burning red, tiptoeing and jumping, I couldn't reach it. I was a year older than most kids in class, but nearly the shortest, while Robert was tall, at least a head taller than me. I jumped again and again, but his fingertips stayed far out of reach. A group of boys burst out laughing. Lily covered her mouth, giggling. Robert looked down at me from above, then slowly ripped my certificate into tiny pieces and let them fall from his hand. The fragments fluttered down over my head like cruel confetti. The boys' laughter grew louder. I crouched down, frantically gathering the scraps, but they were too small, too many. I couldn't piece them back together. My eyes blurred until I couldn't even see the ground anymore. A heavy sadness weighed on me, mixed with the shame I knew I wasn't supposed to feel. My hand shook so badly, I couldn't pick up anything. Big tears rolled down my cheeks. Through the haze, I looked up at Robert. Why? I had already moved out. I had promised myself never to step foot in the Johnson house again. Why did he still have to tear apart something that mattered so much to me? The laughter suddenly faded. Maybe they realized I was crying too loudly, afraid a teacher might hear, and they scattered. Only Robert remained, his face cold and hard. And Lily, whose expression still dripped with scorn. The more I cried, the more it hurt until I couldn't stop. I remembered how I'd run so fast I lost a shoe on the way, racing to show someone my certificate. I thought maybe for once someone wanted to see what I'd achieved, to see me. I only wanted just once for someone to look at me, but Robert's voice cut through my sobbing, sharp and cruel. It's because you took first place that Mom got sick again. I froze, staring at him through my tears. Then it all clicked. Mom had found out about my test results. The housekeeper, trying to comfort her, had said something like, "The father of that mountain kid couldn't have been smart. This must have come from Mrs. Johnson's side." That single comment shattered her. She refused to believe anything could come from me. Not from her child, not from me. Her emotions spun out of control, and she collapsed again. For half a year now, Mom's mental state had been fragile. The smallest thing could break her. After 8 years in that isolated town, she had nearly wasted away. And now, back in New York, she was falling apart all over again. I heard Robert's words replaying in my head, tears flooding but refusing to fall anymore. No matter what I did, I was always wrong. Even being first place was a mistake. Robert glared at me with hatred, but his eyes were rimmed red. For the first time, his gaze wavered, uncertain. I just wanted my mother back, the mother the teacher once described, gentle as moonlight, radiant as the sun. "Emily Johnson," he said bitterly, "where did you hide my mom? Give her back to me. If you give her back, I'll piece your certificate together and return it. Deal?" I lowered my head, unable to meet his eyes. I only saw his clean white sneakers and Lily's glittering princess dress walking away from Emmy. By the time I looked up, they were gone. All I could whisper was, "I'm sorry, I guess I've always been wrong. Always." Dazed, I wandered back toward the dorm. But the dorm manager came in and asked, "Why are you still here?" "The dorms. Closing for winter break." It hit me the semester had ended. I hurriedly packed up my books and stepped outside with my backpack. I had nowhere to go. I drifted across campus until I reached the front gate. The guard called out, "Hey, kid, which class are you in? Your parents aren't here yet?" "We're about to walk up." I stared at him blankly, then walked past. He tried to stop me. "Wait, where are your mom and dad?" But a teacher pulled him aside, whispering, "Don't worry about her. The Johnsons don't want her." I walked out of the school grounds, down a long, endless street. Night had fallen. The city lights glowed all around. I passed a plaza with an inflatable castle and a merry-go-round. Children's laughter filled the air. One of my former classmates was there with his mom, playing happily with other kids. Even under the dim lights, he spotted me. He pointed me out, shouting something to his mother and friends. The woman holding his hand glared at me with contempt before pulling him further away. His friends threw snacks at me as I walked past, head down, moving quickly toward the other side of the street. A car horn blared. The window rolled down and an angry driver yelled, "Red light!" Whose kid are you? Walking like you've got a death wish?" Startled, I stumbled back onto the sidewalk. His words echoed in my head, especially. "Those last ones, whose kid are you?" "I don't have a home. I don't know where to go." The day Uncle Robert dropped me off at boarding school was the only time he ever drove me anywhere himself. He told me, "The Johnsons will send you money for living expenses. Don't come back again." But maybe he forgot that when winter or summer break comes, the school doesn't allow students to stay. Or maybe after 6 months had passed, he had already forgotten me. I carry my backpack, with only a bank card Uncle Robert had once given me and a little cash in my pocket. I wandered the streets until midnight before finally spotting a small store with a sign that read, "Overnight Motel." I walked in and pulled out my bank card, but the receptionist shook her head and said kids weren't allowed to rent a room alone. She asked me where my parents were, then turned to make a call, saying she would notify the police to help me. While she wasn't looking, I quietly slipped away into the night. I really had nowhere to go. I found an underpass that blocked the wind, curled up in a corner, and tried to endure until morning. But the next day came, and the day after that, and I still couldn't find a place to stay. I could only buy a little food, but never enough to afford shelter. After thinking and thinking, I realized the only option was to try going back to the Johnson's house. I told myself I would just ask Uncle Robert once, beg him to help me find somewhere to stay during the break. Then I would be obedient and never come back again. Mom was still sick, not recovered yet. My brother said she couldn't see me. I thought about it for a long time, and only in the late afternoon did I finally remember the name of the neighborhood. Where the Johnsons lived, I planned to take a taxi, copying the way adults hailed one on the street. On the way, I passed a bakery. Through the glass, I saw a beautiful pink cake on display. I clutched the crumpled bills in my pocket, and in the end, I couldn't resist stepping inside to buy one. When I was little, Mom once told me a story. Before she was taken away to the mountains, every birthday she had a huge pink birthday cake even. Though by then, she wasn't a child anymore. She told me she was the youngest daughter of the Johnson family, with parents and a brother who loved her more than anything in the world. Still remember her face in the dim light that night when she told me. Her eyes sparkled as if she was reliving those happy days. I thought maybe if I brought her this pink cake, she would be a little happier. Maybe she would hate me less, even just for a moment. Maybe she would look at me just once. I held the cake box carefully in my arms. Through the clear wrapping, the pink frosting looked so inviting. I swallowed hard without meaning to. I had never had a birthday cake before. I had never even tasted one. To this day, I don't even know when my birthday is, or Mom's. I clutched the cake tight against my chest and got into a taxi. The driver kept asking me where my parents were. I lowered my head, squeezing the ribbon around the cake box, and muttered nervously, "They're at home." I can go back by myself. Thankfully, he didn't throw me out, but drove me to the address I gave him. By the time I reached the Johnsons' mansion, it was already dark. The front yard was full of cars, and the whole house glowed with bright lights. It looked like they were having guests. I stepped into the yard, walked up the front steps, and saw the door was only slightly ajar. I knocked, rang the bell, but no one answered. Laughter and voices carried from inside, but no one seemed to hear. I stood there for a long time, then finally gathered my courage. Quietly, I slipped off my shoes, pushed open the door, and walked in. In the living room stood another pink cake, much larger than mine, stacked with many tiers. On the top sat a beautiful princess doll in a sparkling crown. Lily Johnson squealed with excitement. It has to be a huge celebration. Today's the day Emily finally moves in with us. A young, elegant couple stood nearby, smiling warmly. Emily being adopted into the Johnson family is such a blessing for her, they said. Their faces shared a few features with Emily's. They must have been her parents. I looked around carefully, making sure Mom wasn't there before stepping closer. I missed her so much. I wanted to see her, but I was terrified she would lose control again if she saw. No one noticed me. So finally, trembling, I called softly, "Uncle." Uncle Robert was holding candles, about to place them on the big cake. He was still smiling gently as he said, "Lily, go call your mom. She hasn't come down yet." But then he heard my voice. His smile froze. His face stiffened. He turned his head, staring at me in shock, as if he didn't recognize me at first thought then. Suddenly, realization hit him. His expression darkened. "Who told you to come here? Didn't I say you were supposed to stay at school during the holidays?" I gripped the ribbon in my hands tighter. The little cake in my arms suddenly felt unbearably heavy, even though it was so small compared to the grand one on the table. I couldn't offer it. I couldn't let it go, either my throat burned as I stammered awkwardly. "It's winter break now. The school said I can't stay there anymore." Uncle Robert's face twisted with impatience. "Then rent a room outside." "Didn't I transfer you money already?" "I put $10,000 into your account. Did you blow through it all?" "I told you the Johnson family only provides your basic living expenses. We will not fund your wasteful spending." I wanted to explain that the money was still there, but no one would rent a room to a child alone. But Uncle Robert was furious. His anger so sharp it almost felt like hatred. His scolding rained down on me, leaving no space to speak. He glanced up toward the stairs, his eyes full of anxiety. "Enough. I'll have someone transfer you another $10,000. Now get out. Don't let Lily see you here." I hurried to say, "It's not about money. I don't need money. I just want it, but..." Before I could finish, Mom's gentle voice floated down from the staircase. "Sweetie, blow out the candles and make your wish." My mom was walking hand in hand with Lily, and behind them was Uncle Robert, the man who used to be her husband. Maybe he still was. Mom lowered her eyes to the floor below and, by chance, met mine. That gentle face froze instantly. My uncle's angry voice burst out like an explosion beside me. "Didn't you hear me? I told you to leave. Whatever money you need, I'll wire it to you." Emily and the young couple standing next to them looked at me with the same disgust, their eyes full of impatience. Heat rushed up my face and ears. Shame burned through me until I wished the ground would swallow me whole. I hadn't even figured out where I would sleep tonight, but at that moment, none of it mattered. The cake in my hands felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. I couldn't say a single word. I just turned and ran, stumbling in panic toward the door. Behind me, Mom called out, telling me to wait. I wasn't sure if she meant me, but my feet froze anyway. I didn't dare turn my head. Footsteps came down the stairs and drew closer. Then I heard Mom's voice, hoarse, weary. "Let me take her. I'll find her a place to stay." She must have known why I came. For more than a decade, I'd been her daughter. She hated me, despised me, yet she was still the only person in this world who truly understood me. My eyes stung as my uncle's impatient voice cut in. "No, just hire a sitter. Don't get involved with her anymore." Mom's tone stayed calm. "It's fine. Tonight I still feel steady enough." She walked past me and headed for the door. My uncle signaled the driver to follow. Soon, Mom and I were sitting in the back seat together. She took the left by the window. I pressed myself into the far right corner, trying to keep as much distance as possible. She once told me I carried the stench of that man, my classmates. Said I smelled too, that I reeked like the traffickers who'd stolen people away. All I wanted now was to sit far enough from her so she wouldn't feel disgusted. Outside, trees blurred past in the night. I heard Mom tell the driver, find her a room near the elementary school. I lowered my gaze to the cake in my lap. I didn't hope for her to even glance at me. This drive reminded me of the first day I was dropped at boarding school. My uncle drove me himself. They only wanted to get rid of me to confirm with their own eyes I wouldn't come back. But this time, Mom unexpectedly turned her head and looked at me. Startled, my whole body tensed, stiff as stone. Feeling her eyes on me, I ducked lower, curling my toes tight inside my shoes. At last, her voice broke the silence. "That cake, did you buy it just to eat by yourself?" The ribbon in my hand trembled violently. It had been so long, too. Long since I'd heard her voice sound this gentle, almost tender. It was like long ago, before she rejected me completely. My head sank even lower, almost touching the cake box. Still, I scraped together the courage to whisper, barely louder than a mosquito, "No, I bought it for you." The silence that followed was unbearable. My body went rigid, my back and palms drenched with cold sweat. I braced myself, certain she would erupt again like before, screaming at me to die. But instead, her voice stayed calm. "It looks nice." She reached out and took the cake from my arms. I glanced up and tears filled my eyes. My whole body shook as I bit down on my lip. Staring at her, the woman who had once held me so tightly, suddenly, I found the courage to brush my hair aside, blurting out fast, trying to keep my voice steady. "Mom, I already shaved off most of my eyebrows. I thought maybe I wouldn't look the same anymore. I even tried scraping off my scars, but they bled. They healed, then scarred again. For months I kept trying, but the scars only grew worse. Now all I can show you are these eyebrows." "Almost gone." Her face froze, stunned. I saw her eyes turn red, and inside my head, a desperate scream rose up. "Say something, Mom. Please say something. Tell me I don't look like him anymore," but no words came. My hands gripped the edge of the seat, trembling. Finally, her gaze shifted away, turning to the window. Her voice floated soft as a breeze. "Don't do that again. You'll only hurt yourself." It felt like my whole body was lifted up and then slammed down hard. I understood then, no matter what I cut away, I would still resemble him. That night, Mom rented me a small apartment near the elementary school and even found a sitter immediately despite the hour. She made my bed herself, set up the desk, arranged everything. When she finished, she called me to sit with her on the sofa. She opened the cake box, cut 2 slices, one for me, one for herself. She took a bite and looked at me. "It's sweet." "Go on, eat." My hands were still trembling. Quickly, I grabbed the fork and tasted a bite. The cream melted on my tongue. "So this is what cake tastes like?" "It's really good." I nodded hard. "Yes, it's sweet." She said nothing more, just ate her piece in silence. I ate mine slowly, one bite at a time, wishing the slice could last longer. If only it were bigger. If only we could keep eating together, sweet. Not just because of the cake. Truly sweet. I ate as slowly as I could, but the plate was soon empty. When I looked up, Mom had already set hers down. Mom looked at me, her voice still calm. She had already paid the rent on this house for 10 years and even prepaid the nanny's high salary. It was enough to take care of me until I grew up. She also promised to add more money into my account so I could live and study without worry. I stared at her in confusion. While I was still trying to process her words, she continued, "Ethan, from now on, don't go back to the Smiths. And don't come looking for me either." The sweetness that lingered in my mouth from the ice cream suddenly turned bitter. After a long silence, I finally nodded, my voice dry. "Yes, Mom, I understand." She took a slow breath and raised her hand to cover her face for a moment. "Ethan, I failed you. Mom, you could never reject me." I stared at the bottom of the plate where a little bit of melted ice cream was left. After a while, I shook my head. "You never hurt me, Mom. I heard from people in the mountains that after Grandma bought you, she tied you up before I was born. Later, when Aunt May lost her mind, she tried every way to get rid of me. But Grandma and Dad believed you were carrying a boy. So they watched you day and night, in the end. You still gave birth to me. Both Grandma and Dad were terribly disappointed. They said I had stolen the place of the son they wanted. They believed if I died, he would return. When they held me as an infant wrapped in swaddling cloth, ready to drown me, the one who had wished for my death during the pregnancy was ironically the only one who protected me. You, Mom, you were the first person to shield me. You once loved me, even if just a little in the past, and maybe not later on. But the person who hurt me was never you. I only thought. From now on, I wouldn't have a mother anymore. I should. have eaten that slice of cake more slowly. Why couldn't I hold back? Mom stood up. The nanny will be here soon. Should take care of you. She turned and left. The sound of the door closing was as soft as the wind. I sat there silently, staring at the cake on the coffee table. It was small, barely touched, only 2 bites gone, more than half still left. Suddenly, I thought maybe Mom wanted to keep her stomach empty to go home and share the big cake with my brother and Sophia Green. That was when I truly began living completely alone. I sat by myself in class, in the dorm, even during summer and winter breaks when I went back to an empty house. Sometimes the nanny came by to cook, but she never spoke to me, always cold-faced. I even wondered if she was mute. Then one day I overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen. That's when I realized, just like everyone else, she simply didn't want to talk to me. So I lived like that alone, finishing all 4 years of elementary school, even skipping 2 grades. My classmates changed over time. Those who once bullied me eventually got bored and ignored me. The only time anyone called my name was when the teacher read out the top student after exams. Other than that, it was like I'd forgotten my own name. My life felt walled in by 4 thick barriers, keeping me away from the world. Gradually, I stopped interacting with anyone. By the time I was in 4th grade, Daniel Smith no longer sent people to pick on me. Occasionally, I still caught sight of him. He grew fast, but seemed quieter than before. He was in 6th grade, playing basketball with the other boys on the court. And the first person to run up and hand him a bottle of water was still Sophia Green. When I walked by, our eyes accidentally met. His gaze was cold, but there was no resentment left. Maybe by then, he had already started to see me as nothing more than a stranger. I quickly looked away, my palms sweating cold. When middle school started, Daniel Smith no longer attended the same school. I didn't know where he had transferred. My ties with the Smith family were completely cut off. Even later, I rarely saw any of them picking him up outside the school. That's when I started learning biology. I began to understand that half of my blood came from that man. It wasn't something you could erase by shaving off an eyebrow or removing a scar. His shadow would forever be etched into me. I lived alone until I got into the best high school. In the capital, most of my classmates were new faces. Hardly anyone knew my past. Some did, but no one gossiped anymore. Nobody deliberately isolated me. Still, I was used to being alone. I had no friends. The only thing left in my life was studying. My grades remained at the top as always. After every exam during award ceremonies, the teachers would read out names. The class would always laugh and cheer except when my name was called. That's when silence fell, awkward and suffocating. One teacher even tried to ease the mood, saying, "Let's all congratulate Ethan Johnson." The class clapped, but the applause was stiff and forced, and so I stayed alone all the way into the 2nd semester of sophomore year. One rare summer PE class, the teacher let us do free activities. I stayed in the classroom working through practice problems. Just as I finished a math test, Olivia Brown, the class vice president, suddenly stumbled into the room. She collapsed onto the desk, her breathing sharp and shallow. I glanced at her, noticing the cold sweat on her forehead. I wanted to ask if she needed help, but instinct told me she wouldn't want that. The words stuck in my throat until she paled, clutching the desk as if to head toward the nurse's office. I gripped the pen in my hand tighter before I couldn't hold back anymore and asked, "Do you want me to help you walk?" She froze, turning her head with a startled look, as if my voice was the most unexpected thing she'd ever heard. For a moment, I panicked, wanting to bow my head and pretend I hadn't spoken. But then she answered, almost flustered. "Did she just say yes? That must have been agreement." I immediately dropped my pen and hurried to slip my arm through her sleeve to help her out of the classroom. She said she had sudden stomach cramps from her period, and the pain looked almost unbearable. Supporting her, I felt her weight pressing heavier and heavier on my shoulder. I'd grown taller these past years, but thinner too. By the time we reached the stairwell on our way to the nurse's office, I could hardly hold her up anymore. Under The shade of the trees outside, a group of boys carrying basketballs walked by. Struggling, I called out, "Can someone give me a hand?" One of them stopped, turned his head, and I froze when I recognized him. Jason Carter. The last time I'd seen him was back in elementary school. He had changed so much taller now. At least 6 feet, leaner, paler. His boyish features had sharpened into something cold and striking. I hadn't expected him to be at the same high school Dot in that instant. I regretted calling out to him. Even though I had no friends, some instinct inside me still didn't want Jason to look at me with the same disdain he once did or worse. To let my classmates hear him speak of my humiliating past. Biting my lip, I lowered my head and kept dragging Hannah along. But Jason tossed his basketball into the flower bed and silently came over to take her other arm. Dot. My palms were slick with cold sweat, as if I were walking to my own execution. Yet the entire way to the nurse's office, he said nothing. When Hannah was finally lying inside, hooked up to an 4, I stepped out to get her some water. Jason was about to leave. With no one else around, I whispered, "Thank you." He tilted his head, his eyes dropping to my hands. The scars were still carved deep into my skin after all these years, my wrists so thin they were painful to look at. I instinctively tugged my sleeve lower, bracing myself for mockery. But the words I expected never came. Instead, Jason's voice carried a strange hesitation. "Do you still have enough money on your card?" My throat tightened. It took a long moment before I managed to reply, "Yeah, I still have plenty." He simply murmured, "Good," and walked away. We had nothing more to say. Dot after that day, Hannah began talking to me often. She told me, "That day I honestly thought even if I died right there in class, you wouldn't notice. Everyone thinks you're brilliant but cold, that you don't want to deal with anyone. They're all a little scared of you." The sweetness that lingered in my mouth from the ice cream suddenly turned bitter. After a long silence, I finally nodded, my voice dry. "Yes, Mom. I understand." She took a slow breath and raised her hand to cover her face for a moment. "Ethan, I failed you. Mom, you could never reject me." I stared at the bottom of the plate where a little bit of melted ice cream was left. After a while, I shook my head. "You never hurt me, Mom. I heard from people in the mountains that after Grandma bought you, she tied you up before I was born. Later, when Aunt May lost her mind, she tried every way to get rid of me. But Grandma and Dad believed you were carrying a boy. So they watched you day and night. Dot. In the end, you still gave birth to me." Both Grandma and Dad were terribly disappointed. They said I had stolen the place of the son they wanted. They believed if I died, he would return. When they held me as an infant wrapped in swaddling cloth, ready to drown me, the one who had wished for my death during the pregnancy was ironically the only one who protected me. "You, Mom, you were the first person to shield me. You once loved me, even if just a little in the past, and maybe not later on. But the person who hurt me was never you. I only thought. From now on, I wouldn't have a mother anymore. I should have eaten that slice of cake more slowly. Why couldn't I hold back?" Mom stood up. "The nanny will be here soon. She'd take care of you." She turned and left. The sound of the door closing was as soft as the wind. I sat there silently, staring at the cake on the coffee table. It was small, barely touched, only 2 bites gone, more than half still left. Suddenly I thought maybe Mom wanted to keep her stomach empty to go home and share the big cake with my brother and Sophia Green. That was when I truly began living completely alone. I sat by myself in class, in the dorm, even during summer and winter breaks when I went back to an empty house. Sometimes the nanny came by to cook, but she never spoke to me, always cold-faced. I even wondered if she was mute. Then one day, I overheard her talking on the phone in the kitchen. That's when I realized, just like everyone else, she simply didn't want to talk to me. Dot. So I lived like that, alone, finishing all 4 years of elementary school, even skipping 2 grades. My classmates changed over time. Those who once bullied me eventually got bored and ignored me. The only time anyone called my name was when the teacher read out the top student after exams. Other than that, It was like I'd forgotten my own. My life felt walled in by 4 thick barriers, keeping me away from the world. Gradually, I stopped interacting with anyone. By the time I was in 4th grade, Daniel Smith no longer sent people to pick on me. Occasionally, I still caught sight of him. He grew fast but seemed quieter than before. He was in 6th grade, playing basketball with the other boys on the court, and the first person to run up and hand him a bottle of water was still Sophia Green. When I walked by, our eyes accidentally met. His gaze was cold, but there was no resentment left. Maybe by then he had already started to see me as nothing more than a stranger. I quickly looked away, my palms sweating cold. When middle school started, Daniel Smith no longer attended the same school. I didn't know where he had transferred. My ties with the Smith family were completely cut off. Even later, I rarely saw any of them picking him up outside the school. That's when I started learning biology. I began to understand that half of my blood came from that man. It wasn't something you could erase by shaving off an eyebrow or removing a scar. His shadow would forever be etched into me. I lived alone until I got into the best high school in the capital. Most of my classmates were new faces. Hardly anyone knew my past. Some did, but no one gossiped anymore. Nobody deliberately isolated me. Still, I was used to being alone. I had no friends. The only thing left in my life was studying. My grades remained at the top as always. After every exam during award ceremonies, the teachers would read out names. The class would always laugh and cheer except when my name was called. That's when silence fell, awkward and suffocating. One teacher even tried to ease the mood, saying, "Let's all congratulate Ethan Johnson." The class clapped, but the applause was stiff and forced. And so I stayed alone all the way into the 2nd semester of sophomore year. One rare summer PE class. The teacher let us do free activities. I stayed in the classroom working through practice problems. Just as I finished a math test, Olivia Brown, the class vice president, suddenly stumbled into the room. She collapsed onto the desk, her breathing sharp and shallow. I glanced at her, noticing the cold sweat on her forehead. I wanted to ask if she needed help, but instinct told me she wouldn't want that. The words stuck in my throat until she paled, clutching the desk as if to head toward the nurse's office. I gripped the pen in my hand tighter before I couldn't hold back anymore and asked, "Do you want me to help you walk?" She froze, turning her head with a startled look, as if my voice was the most unexpected thing she'd ever heard. For a moment, I panicked, wanting to bow my head and pretend I hadn't spoken. But then she answered, almost flustered. "Did she just say yes? That must have been agreement." I immediately dropped my pen and hurried to slip my arm through her sleeve to help her out of the classroom. She said she had sudden stomach cramps from her period and the pain looked almost unbearable. Supporting her, I felt her weight pressing heavier and heavier on my shoulder. I'd grown taller these past years, but thinner too. By the time we reached the stairwell on our way to the nurse's office, I could hardly hold her up anymore. Under the shade of the trees outside, a group of boys carrying basketballs walked by. Struggling, I called out, "Can someone give me a hand?" One of them stopped, turned his head, and I froze when I recognized him. Jason Carter. The last time I'd seen him was back in elementary school. He had changed so much taller now. At least 6 feet, leaner, paler. His boyish features had sharpened into something cold and striking. I hadn't expected him to be at the same high school in that instant. I regretted calling out to him. Even though I had no friends, some instinct inside me still didn't want Jason to look at me with the same disdain he once did or worse. To let my classmates hear him speak of my humiliating past. Biting my lip, I lowered my head and kept dragging Hannah along. But Jason tossed his basketball into the flower bed and silently came over to take her other arm. My palms were slick with cold sweat, as if I were walking to my own execution. Yet the entire way to the nurse's office, he said nothing. When Hannah was finally lying inside, hooked up to N4, I stepped out to get her some water. Jason was about to leave. With no one else around, I whispered, "Thank you." He tilted his head, his eyes dropping to my hands. The scars were still carved deep into my skin after all these years, my wrists so thin they were painful to look at. I instinctively tugged my sleeve lower, bracing myself for mockery. But the words I expected never came. Instead, Jason's voice carried a strange hesitation. "Do you still have enough money on your card?" My throat tightened. It took a long moment before I managed to reply, "Yeah, I still have plenty." He simply murmured, "Good," and walked away. We had nothing more to say after that day. Hannah began talking to me often. She told me, "That day, I honestly thought even if I died right there in class, you wouldn't notice. Everyone thinks you're brilliant but cold, that you don't want to deal with anyone. They're all a little scared of you." I thought for a moment, then shook my head. I don't know. I just feel that way. Like I'm carrying a weight. Like I've always been guilty of something. All my life, I have never been able to fully control my own existence. Even though I never meant to hurt anyone, my very presence had blocked Mom away for 3 years. The first time she almost escaped. Because of me, she was caught and kept 4 more years. My existence cast a shadow over the Miller family they could never shake off. Even Chloe, the girl Mom once wanted to adopt, was eventually forced back. To her birth family, no one truly escaped. Emma just pulled me into a quiet hug. I got married at 27 to a kind, steady college professor. The wedding was small. I had no family of my own, and he only had his grandmother left. That evening, right after the reception, a black car from the Miller family suddenly pulled up. I was still in my wedding dress when I rushed outside. There was Mom standing in the fading orange sunset, her eyes red and watery as she looked at me. She said she had thought about it over and over and decided she had to see me once. Just this once. Ethan stood outside the car too, his eyes faintly red. Mom handed me a gift box, her hand trembling. Inside were 2 necklaces. She said they had been auctioned as symbols of eternal bond, so she thought they'd make the perfect wedding gift. I hesitated, unsure of its value, but she pressed it firmly into my hands. I couldn't find words. After a long pause, I finally whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Suddenly, she grabbed my wrist, her voice breaking with sobs. "Anna, I just want you to be happy. All these years I've owed you so much." My eyes stung, my throat closed. I shook my head. "No, Mom, you don't owe me anything. You never did anything wrong. You don't owe anyone." Tears streamed down her face. She broke down, her eyes filled with bottomless sorrow. "Could you call me Mom again?" I lowered my head, unable to meet her eyes. My voice cracked. "Mom." She pulled me into her arms and held me tightly for a long, long time. Her voice trembled against my ear. "You are my Anna, my daughter, my good, sweet girl." Silent tears slipped down my cheeks, soaking into the dry autumn leaves beneath our feet. Thankfully, no one else saw. It's strange after all these years, whenever I rest my head on Mom's shoulder, I can still catch that faint familiar scent. A fragrance I can't name, yet it's the one that makes my heart feel the most at peace in the world. That my voice was hoarse as I spoke earnestly. "Seeing you overcome everything, seeing you live well now, I truly, truly feel happy for you, Mom." She hugged me tighter. I heard her whisper softly, "Emily, you must live happily too. Don't dwell on the past anymore." I nodded hard. "Yes, Mom." After a long while, she let me go. I watched her and Uncle Robert get into the car. Michael Johnson opened the door, then turned back to look at me. His expression was still a little stiff, but his voice was softer. "If anything really happens, call me. Don't think we could just ignore you." I nodded through blurry eyes. "I know." I stood there as their car rolled away. The last glow of sunset faded. But no matter how dark the night grew, the sun would always rise again. After the wedding, I returned to my daily life, though something inside me had shifted in a way I couldn't quite describe. That moment with Mom under the golden dusk, that tearful embrace, it felt like a door closing on years of pain, while another door opened towards something new. I realized that while the past could never be erased, it no longer chained me the way it once had. I went back to my work in fashion design, gradually building my name. One day, the company announced an international collaboration with a major brand. To my surprise, the lead representative was none other than Michael Johnson, now a successful businessman at the helm of a renowned fashion group. When we met again, his eyes no longer carried the coldness or resentment of the past. Instead, he quietly handed me a folder. Inside was a proposal for a collection inspired by stories of resilience and triumph. "I thought you'd understand this concept better than anyone," he said, his voice deep but sincere as we worked together. Michael and I slowly grew more open. He spoke of Mom, of the years she spent rebuilding herself, and how she often mentioned me with regret. "She always said she owed you a real apology," he admitted. I smiled without replying, but in my heart, I knew that embrace at the wedding had already been the truest answer. The project turned out to be a resounding success. Our collection was praised not only for its designs, but also for its powerful message of resilience and hope. At the launch event, I stood on stage beneath the dazzling lights. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a shadow in the background. I looked down into the audience. Mom, Uncle Robert, and Michael sat together. Mom clapped with shining eyes, while Michael gave me a subtle nod, as if to say he finally saw me not as the daughter of a criminal, but as Emily Tran, a woman who had risen from the darkness on her own. After the event, Mom came to me with a letter. In her trembling handwriting, full of raw emotion, "Emily," she wrote, "I was wrong to let my pain cloud the love I had for you. You are the only light I had in those darkest years. Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I once gave up on you." By the time I finished reading, tears streamed down my face, but my heart felt light. I knew then that from this moment forward, Mom and I would no longer be two lines crossing, once and parting forever. We might never be the kind of mother and daughter others were blessed to have, but at last we had found our way back to each other.